Daf Yudalid, sponsored for Refuah Shalema for Shira Hadassah Bas Miriam. The first Indian concerns taxes collected from partners. The Gemara tells us that as long as partners share a granary and only one's produce remains there, the tax collector can collect taxes for all of them from this representative. However, if their working relationship is landowner and sharecropper, the taxes cannot be collected from the sharecropper. He has no obligation to pay a land tax. The next Indian the Gemara discusses is a resident of a city who has to pay for another's taxes. If a resident fled to evade paying the collector, he does not have to run after him. He takes his taxes from another resident who has to retrieve his money from the resident who fled. This is only for the present year, because only the king has the right to tax another resident. Once he's been paid his taxes in full by the tax collector, the collector cannot, the collector fronted the taxes from his own money, he cannot go now and collect for the previous year from the resident on behalf of another. The next Indian is buying animals from men engaged in the fertilizing business. In ancient times, people that accumulated livestock would fertilize other fields with their animals for money. If they fertilize fields within the tchum of the city, one is not permitted to buy animals from them, since they are not careful to prevent animals belonging to other people from mixing in with theirs. If they fertilize outside the tchum, then it is permitted to buy from them unless one sees an owner from inside the tchum chasing a stray animal outside the tchum. The next Indian is a Jew testifying against another Jew in a Gentile court concerning money matters. The Gemara says in such a case, he is excommunicated, since in a Gentile court they accept the testimony of one witness to extract money from the defendant, whereas a Jewish court requires two witnesses. However, where they require two, or city courts as opposed to village courts, that distinguish between one witness and two witnesses, as we do, it is permitted to him to testify even against another Jew in a Gentile court. In the case of a distinguished person, that not testifying would possibly desecrate Hashem's name, the Gemara remains undecided what to do. The next Indian is concerning selling land to a Gentile next to another Jew's field. In this case also, the court excommunicates him. Now, the reason is not Dina de Bar Metzra. In other words, he's excommunicated not because he sold the land to somebody else and didn't offer the land to the neighbor next to him, who would now have a contiguous piece of property, because the buyer can say, I spared you a Gentile neighbor. But the reason is, in the case of where he sold it to a Gentile, the neighbor can say, you positioned me a lion on my border, since a Gentile is not required to fulfill Hilchos Shchenim. The seller has to accept upon himself any damage the Jew suffers from the Gentile. Now we come to a new Mishnah. If a tax collector who took a donkey as taxes replaced this donkey with another donkey, or a robber took clothing and replaced any of these items, the second Jew can keep them because the original owner gave up hope from retrieving them. The Gemara brings a brisa which contradicts this Mishnah and holds he can't keep it. The second one who received it must return it to the original owner. The Gemara resolves this contradiction in two ways. Number one, the Brisa holds Yush alone is not Koneh. Therefore, the tax collector did not acquire it, but remained in the possession of the original owner that came into his possession, Be'isur. Another version is Yush acquires. The Brisa says, if he wants to return it, that's what it means to say, not that he has to return it. If he wants to return it, even though he was Koneh B'Yush, because he refuses to remain with this item that was stolen by the tax collector or the thief, he should give it back to the original owner. Now, in order to understand the next topic, we must include the second law in the Mishnah. The first opinion in the Gemara is when the Mishnah says that the second Jew can keep what the tax collector gave him. That's only if the tax collector is a Gentile. If it is a Jew, we cannot assume he gave up hope because he hopes he can eventually take the Jewish collector to court. The second opinion is that he is more likely to get it back if the collector was a Gentile, because the Gentile court forcibly collects. In order to explain this qualification that differentiates between Gentiles and Jews, the qualification applies to the second law of the Mishnah. If one saves someone else's property from a flood, troops, or thieves, it belongs to the finder only if he knows that the owners gave up hope of getting them back. If we are uncertain if the owner gave up hope, he cannot keep it if the tax collector is Jewish, only if he is a Gentile, because their courts enforce their laws more severely. So it would come out, according to this, that the application of this distinction between a Gentile collector and a Jewish collector, or a Gentile court and a Jewish court, refers to the second law of the Mishnah as opposed to the first. And the second law is what happens in such a case where one retrieves somebody's property from a flood, troops, or thieves. Stolen items' susceptibility to tumah. An item cannot become tameh unless it is a utensil. The general rule is an owner can determine if it has reached its completed state. The Tana Kama holds that a gazlan cannot make that determination because his identity is known. The owner hopes to collect in court and does not despair of retrieving a stolen item, whereas a ganav, whose identity is unknown, causes the owner to despair. Rabbi Shimon argues with the Tana Kama. He holds just the opposite. The brazenness of the gazlan that steals in public causes the owner to despair. But a ganav who steals secretly is afraid of getting caught, and therefore the victim still believes perhaps in court he can get his money back. Ula holds that he argues that this is true only if we are not certain the owner despaired. But if we know that the owner did despair, then both opinions hold that the thief acquires. Rabbah, on the other hand, holds even if we are certain that he was miyayish, the argument still applies between Rabbi Shimon and the Tana Kama because his yush may not be full-hearted. Our Mishnah that mentions both Gazlan, who is the tax collector, the Ganav, as listim, as mentioned in the Mishnah as listim, does not follow either opinion of the Tana Kama or Rabbi Shimon, because both differentiate between a Ganav and a Gazlan, whereas our Mishnah holds the law is the same. The Gemara answers it that we could hold according to Rabbah, that even where the owner declared Yush, there still is an argument between Rabbi Shimon and the Tana Kama, and the Mishnah follows Rabbi Shimon. Both are referring to brazen thieves. One is armed and the other not. Concerning both of these thieves, their consecration and tithing of property they stole would also be effective. Although Rebbe says a ganav is kegazlan, so we could explain that he is the Tana of our Mishnah, because he holds a Ganav and a Gazlan are the same. So when our Mishnah mentions Ganav and Gazlan, it could be his opinion. Since we have our other alternative answer of Trey Gavna Gazlan, of 2 Gazlanim, he could hold like the Tana Kama that the thought of a Ganav does not render the hide susceptible to Tumah. The Mishnah states its third law concerning a swarm of bees that escaped the hive and the owner was miyayish, one who found and can keep them. It prefaces this law with the word v'chein. A woman or a child can identify the owner. The first thing the Gemara explains is the preface v'chein, which means the law of this case is more novel than the previous cases. Why? A swarm of bees are the owners only midrabanan, because they tend to fly away. Therefore, we could think that even an assumption of Yush suffices for the finder to keep it. The Mishnah teaches us otherwise. Women or children believed b'meisiach lefitumo. If they saw someone running after the bees, and in the course of their discussion they mentioned to someone that they saw a person running after them, although it is not official testimony, it suffices to indicate where the bees came from and the owner. Meisiach lefi tumo, this concept of casual testimony, is legal only to permit a woman to marry. In those cases, similar to that where it permits a woman to marry. For example, a child tells us he is going to a funeral of a certain man. We allow the wife to remarry. The Mishnah's reliance in this case of the bees is because it is testimony to support a kinyan d'Rabbanan. However, there is a case where we rely on them in a biblical law. A woman's child watched over his mother, claiming she was not violated in captivity. She can marry a Kohen since it is only a possibility that she was violated, so we rely on her cheskes kashrus. Cutting a branch from the tree of his neighbor with compensation to retrieve his bees. The Mishnah brings a machlokus between Rabbi Shmuel ben Baroka and the Tana Kama. Rabbi Shmuel permits him to cut off the branch to retrieve his bees. He permits 2 other cases for the same reason. If one spills out his wine to save another's honey, it is a Tanai Bezdin that he must compensate the owner of the wine for the wine. If 2 are traveling together, one's donkey loaded with wood and the other with flax, the donkey carrying the flax dies. The one carrying the wood should load his donkey with the flax and receive compensation from the flax.